Imagine being a proud father, holding your newborn baby in your arms, only to have a stranger demand you hand that child over. Now, imagine that stranger is your neighbor, a so-called HOA Karen, who thinks she runs the entire community. But what she doesn't know is that the man she just threatened isn't an ordinary neighbor. He's a Navy SEAL, trained to protect, defend, and never back down. What happens next will shock everyone on this street. Stay with us, because you won't want to miss this story. She demanded a newborn baby from the wrong family. Because the father she threatened, he's a Navy SEAL. And when he steps in, the entire neighborhood watches justice unfold. Don't blink. This story will leave you speechless. Give me that baby right now before something bad happens. The words tore through the quiet afternoon like a thunderclap. They weren't the words of a concerned neighbor or even of a curious passerby. They were sharp, demanding, filled with entitlement and dripping with venom. The young mother, holding her newborn close to her chest, froze in shock. She had only stepped outside for a moment. The day was warm. The sun was gentle, and a soft breeze rustled the trees along the quiet suburban street. She wanted her baby to feel the sunlight, to breathe in fresh air for the first time since coming home from the hospital. It should have been a peaceful, tender moment between a mother and her child. Instead, it turned into a nightmare. The source of the voice was Karen, the woman the entire neighborhood knew but wished they didn't. With her platinum blonde hair sprayed stiff, oversized sunglasses perched high on her nose, an expression permanently twisted in superiority. She carried herself like the ruler of the block. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was a self-proclaimed queen of the HOA. And in her mind, that meant she owned every house, every yard, every noise, and apparently even every baby. Karen's heels clicked aggressively against the pavement as she marched toward the mother like a soldier storming into battle. Her arms were stiff, her face tight, her jaw clenched. She looked at the baby as though it was a stolen possession that needed to be returned to its rightful owner. The mother tightened her arms protectively, instinctively stepping back toward the front door. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice shaking from both confusion and disbelief. Karen didn't slow down. She didn't soften her tone. "I said hand it over," she snapped. "We don't just let anyone parade babies around here. This is a quiet neighborhood. This is a safe community. You people can't just come here and disturb it. You people..." Those words hit the young mother like ice water. They weren't just about noise or rules, or even the baby. They were about who she was. They were about the color of her skin. She felt the sting immediately. The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, as if sensing his mother's fear. She rocked him gently, trying to calm him while her own heartbeat hammered against her ribs. "This is my baby," she whispered firmly, though her voice trembled. "You have no right to say that." Karen scoffed, tilting her head, her sunglasses glinting in the sunlight. "Oh, please, don't lie to me. I know what's going on here. People like you move in, thinking you can do whatever you want, bringing noise, trouble, and chaos with you. This neighborhood has standards, and if you won't meet them, I'll take matters into my own hands." Her words dripped with arrogance, her tone filled with the kind of superiority that made neighbors avoid her at all costs. But this time, she had gone too far. The mother clutched her baby tighter, her knuckles white. Her legs shook beneath her, but she stood her ground. "You don't touch my child," she said softly but firmly, her voice carrying a strength that surprised even her. But Karen wasn't backing down. In fact, she took another step forward, closing the distance. Her hand twitched, as though she might actually reach for the newborn, and that's when the front door creaked. Inside the house, behind a sheer curtain, a man had been watching the entire time. He hadn't rushed out immediately, not because he didn't care, but because he wanted to see just how far this woman would go. He wanted to be sure of her intentions before stepping in. And now, as he saw Karen's hand inch closer toward his wife and child, he knew it was time. The door swung open slowly, but with a presence that made the air shift. Out stepped the husband, a tall, broad-shouldered man with calm eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen and survived things most people couldn't imagine. His movements were controlled, deliberate, and filled with quiet authority. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to wave his arms or make a scene. His very presence spoke louder than any words Karen had uttered. This man wasn't just a husband. He wasn't just a father. He wasn't even just another homeowner in the neighborhood. He was a Navy SEAL, a man who had trained in some of the harshest conditions in the world, a man who had faced danger head-on and lived to tell the tale, a man whose sole purpose now was to protect his family at all costs. Karen, of course, didn't know this. To her, he was just another neighbor, another target control, another rule breaker to boss around. She had no idea that in the next few moments, she was about to pick a fight with someone who was more than capable of defending his family. Not with fists or weapons, but with the kind of unshakable strength that came from years of service and sacrifice. The husband's eyes locked onto Karen, steady and unblinking. His jaw was set, his posture relaxed yet firm, like a soldier ready for action but confident he wouldn't need to raise a hand. He didn't need to. Karen, noticing him now, faltered for just a second, but her pride wouldn't let her retreat. Instead, she straightened her back, crossed her arms, and sneered. "Oh, so you're the husband," she said with mockery. "Well, you better teach your wife some respect. And if you don't hand over that baby, I'll make sure the HOA deals with you both." The man didn't move an inch. His voice, when it came, was calm, controlled, yet filled with a quiet power that sent a chill through the air. "Step away from my wife and child." Those words weren't shouted. They weren't dramatic, but they carried more weight than any threat Karen had made. They carried the authority of a man who had led missions where life and death hung in the balance. They carried the promise of someone who would never, under any circumstances, let harm come to his family. Karen had no idea what she had just walked into. And in that moment, as the tension hung in the air and the neighborhood began to stir with curious eyes peeking from behind curtains, the battle lines were drawn. This wasn't just a petty HOA squabble anymore. This was something bigger, something deeper, something Karen could never have prepared for. Because when you threaten the Navy SEAL's family, you've already lost. Karen's heels clacked louder as she stormed up the driveway, each step sharper than the last. The sound alone was enough to make the young mother's chest tighten. The baby whimpered softly, sensing the hostile energy, and the mother rocked him instinctively, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here." But it wasn't okay. Not at all. Karen stopped just a few feet away, her perfume wafting through the air, overwhelming and suffocating. She planted her hands on her hips like a police officer about to issue a ticket, her chin tilted high. The baby's tiny cries seemed to irritate her more with every passing second. "This is a quiet neighborhood," Karen snapped, her voice shrill and commanding. "We don't allow strangers or people like you to parade babies around here. The crying, the noise, the disruption, not acceptable. Hand the child over, and I'll take it somewhere safe." The mother's heart dropped. Did she really just hear that? "Safe?" she whispered, hugging her baby tighter. "This is my child. He is safe with me." Karen scoffed loudly, shaking her head in disbelief as though the mother's words were nonsense. "Don't play games with me. I've been watching you two since you moved in. You don't belong here. You don't fit in. And I'm not about to let your screaming baby lower the standards of this neighborhood. If you cared about this child, you'd give him to someone who can raise him properly." The words cut like knives. The young mother's throat burned as she tried to find her voice. Her mind raced. How could someone be this cruel? Her baby was only days old. He wasn't screaming, just making tiny newborn sounds. And yet this woman, this so-called HOA leader, was standing here trying to justify ripping a newborn out of his mother's arms. The mother's grip tightened until her knuckles went white. She took a step back toward the porch, toward the safety of her home, but Karen matched her step, closing in. "Don't you dare walk away from me," Karen hissed. "I'm in charge here. You don't get to decide what's best for this community." "I do." The baby's soft whimpers grew louder, and the mother whispered soothing words, rocking gently. But her voice trembled, her fear slipping through every syllable. "Stay away from me. Please. This is my baby. You don't have the right." Karen cut her off sharply, her voice rising even higher. "Don't lie to me. I know you're not fit to raise this child. I've seen you. I've seen your husband. People like you just move in thinking you can claim what doesn't belong to you. Not in my neighborhood. Not while I'm in charge. The racism behind the words was unmistakable. Her face was twisted in disgust. Her voice filled with venom. The mother felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She couldn't show weakness now, not when her baby depended on her. She stood taller, though her legs shook beneath her. Her arms cradled the infant with fierce protectiveness. "You will not touch my child," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Every word fueled by a mother's instinct to protect. But Karen ignored the warning. She stepped forward again, her hand twitching at her side as though she was preparing to reach for the baby. The mother's breath caught in her throat. Her mind screamed to run, to shout, to do something, anything, to keep her baby safe. And just when Karen leaned in, her shadow falling across the mother and child, the door behind them swung open. The sound was soft, but its impact was immediate. Both women froze. From inside the house, the husband stepped out. He didn't slam the door. He didn't rush out in anger. He walked with controlled precision, the kind of calm that only made his presence more intimidating. The sun hit his broad shoulders, his frame towering over both women, his eyes, sharp and steady, locked on Karen. In that instant, the atmosphere shifted. Karen, for all her arrogance, hesitated. She hadn't expected him. She hadn't planned on facing the man of the house. Still, her pride wouldn't let her back down. She forced a smirk, crossing her arms tightly, trying to look unfazed. "Oh, so you're finally coming out," she sneered. "About time. Maybe you can teach your wife some respect. She doesn't seem to understand how things work around here." The husband didn't reply right away. He looked at his wife, at the baby cradled against her chest, then back at Karen. His jaw tightened slightly, but his eyes remained calm, calculating. He wasn't just looking at Karen. He was assessing her like a soldier sizing up a threat. Finally, he spoke. His voice was deep, steady, and filled with authority. "Step away from my wife and child." Karen let out a laugh, though it sounded more nervous than confident. "Or what?" she shot back. "You think you scare me? I've dealt with men bigger than you. You're new here, and you clearly don't know who runs this neighborhood. I'm head of the HOA, and I have rules. Your baby's crying breaks those rules. Your wife's attitude breaks those rules. And if you don't hand that child over, I'll call the police. I'll have you both arrested. Do you really want to test me?" The mother gasped, clutching her baby tighter. Arrested? For holding their newborn on their own porch? But the husband didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't take a step back. If anything, his calm became more unnerving, more powerful. "Go ahead," he said slowly, his eyes locked on hers. "Call them. Tell them you tried to snatch a baby from its mother. Let's see how that goes for you." The confidence in his words made Karen falter again. For the first time, her smirk wavered. But she quickly tried to recover, tossing her head back. "You think you're tough?" she sneered. "Don't forget, you're not in charge here. I am." The husband tilted his head slightly, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. "Lady," he said, his voice dropping lower, "you have no idea who you're talking to." The weight of his words hung in the air, heavier than any shout could have been. The mother, though still trembling, felt a wave of relief wash over her. Her husband was here, and with him, she knew they were safe. Karen, however, had no idea just how badly she'd underestimated the man standing before her. Karen's face twisted into a scowl as the husband stood tall in front of his wife and newborn. She had expected him to cower, to apologize, maybe even to beg her forgiveness for breaking the rules. But the way he stared at her, calm, steady, and unshaken, was something she wasn't used to, and it rattled her. Still, Karen wasn't the type to admit defeat. Her pride ran too deep. Her need for control was too strong. Crossing her arms tightly across her chest, she tilted her chin upward and let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, so you're the husband?" she said mockingly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Figures. A big man who thinks he can just step outside, puff his chest out, and scare me. Let me tell you something. You don't intimidate me. Not one bit. The Navy SEAL didn't move. His eyes remained locked on her, unblinking, analyzing every twitch, every flicker of her expression. He had been trained to read people, to detect threats before they unfolded, and everything about Karen screamed instability. But unlike battlefields overseas, this was a new kind of enemy, an entitled neighbor who thought she was untouchable. Karen took a step closer, ignoring the tension she felt pressing against her like a wall. "I'm the head of the HOA here," she announced, as if it were some official badge of authority. "That means I make the rules. And right now, the rule is this. Your baby is too loud, your wife is too defiant, and the two of you are lowering the standards of this neighborhood. So either you hand that baby over to me right now, or I will call the police and have you both removed from this property. Permanently." The young mother gasped, clutching her baby tighter to her chest. "Removed?" she whispered, horrified. "This is our home. You can't." Karen cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "Oh, spare me the tears. I've lived here for 15 years. I know the law. I am the law around here. And I won't let this neighborhood turn into a circus because you two think you're special." Her words hung heavy in the air, but the SEAL remained unmoved. His wife glanced up at him, her eyes filled with fear and uncertainty, silently pleading for him to do something. He reached out, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. His touch was firm, grounding her, reminding her that she wasn't alone. Then he spoke. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "The police?" he repeated slowly. "Good. Call them. Let's see what they think when they hear that you tried to snatch a newborn from its mother's arms." Karen's smug smile faltered. Just for a second, the confidence slipped from her face. She hadn't expected him to call her bluff so easily, but she quickly straightened, forcing her smirk back into place. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she sneered, "trying to turn this around on me. But let me tell you something. I've dealt with worse. You might scare your wife with that act, but not me." The SEAL tilted his head slightly, a faint glimmer of amusement in his eyes. "Worse," he said softly, almost to himself. His voice carried no anger, just a steady, unnerving calm. "You have no idea what worse looks like." Karen bristled, misinterpreting his words as an attempt to frighten her. "Oh, please," she spat. "What are you going to do? Yell at me? Slam the door? You don't have any power here. I do. And if you don't believe me, then watch what happens when I make that call." She pulled out her phone, holding it up like a weapon, her finger hovering over the screen. The mother's breath caught in her throat. The thought of police cars pulling up, of being treated like criminals in their own home, made her stomach churn. She could already imagine the gossip, the stares from neighbors, the humiliation. She looked at her husband again, fear flashing in her eyes. But once more he didn't flinch. Instead, he took a slow step forward, closing the gap between himself and Karen. He wasn't aggressive. He didn't raise his fists or shout, but the sheer quiet confidence in his movements made her instinctively step back. "Go ahead," he said again, his voice lower now, almost a growl. "Make the call. But you better be ready to explain why half the neighborhood is about to watch you try to rip a baby out of its mother's arms." At that, Karen glanced around, and for the first time, she realized she wasn't as alone as she thought. Across the street, a curtain shifted. Next door, a door cracked open. A man with a lawnmower paused, pretending to fiddle with the machine, but clearly listening. People were watching. Phones were in hands. Cameras might already be recording. The color drained from Karen's face. For years, she had bullied her neighbors behind closed doors, threatening fines, making petty complaints, controlling their every move. But this was different. This was public. And she could feel the shift, the control slipping through her fingers. Still, her pride wouldn't let her back down fully. "You think they'll take your side?" she hissed, though her voice was quieter now. "You're new here. They don't know you. They know me. They trust me. I've been running this neighborhood for years." The SEAL took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. His presence was overwhelming now, like a wave she couldn't push back against. "Lady," he said, his voice even lower, You have no idea who you're talking to." Something in his tone sent a chill down Karen's spine. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just dealing with an ordinary man. There was something about the way he stood, the way he looked at her, like he had faced far greater threats than an HOA bully with a clipboard and a cell phone. Her bravado faltered, her phone trembling slightly in her hand. The young mother, though still clutching her baby tightly, felt a flicker of relief. She looked at her husband, her protector, and knew that Karen had finally met her match. Karen's smirk was faltering, but her pride clung stubbornly to its last threads. She shifted her weight, phone still in her hand, and tried to look confident. "You think you can scare me with those eyes? With your little act? I've dealt with men like you before. Big muscles, tough talk. But at the end of the day, this is my neighborhood. I'm the one people listen to. I'm the one who sets the rules. Not you." The Navy SEAL didn't respond right away. He simply studied her, his silence more unnerving than anything he could have said. His wife, standing just behind him with their newborn, could feel the air growing heavier by the second. The baby whimpered again, pressing his tiny face into her chest as though to escape the tension radiating around them. For a moment, the mother hesitated. She wasn't one for confrontations. She had always believed in keeping her head down, avoiding drama, and focusing on her family. But now, with her baby in her arms and Karen spewing venom, she knew silence was an option. Her voice trembled at first, but she forced herself to speak. "We didn't move here to cause trouble," she said, her eyes locking on Karen. "We came here because we wanted peace, because we wanted our child to grow up in a safe community. My husband has given everything for this country. He's risked his life so families like yours can feel safe in your homes." Karen blinked, her smirk faltering further. The mother's voice grew steadier. "He's not just my husband. He's not just a father. He's a Navy SEAL. He's fought battles you can't even imagine. He's protected strangers with his own life. And you stand here, in front of our home, trying to steal his baby and threaten his family? You should be ashamed of yourself." The words rang out like a hammer striking steel. The truth was now laid bare, echoing across the quiet neighborhood. Karen's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. She looked from the wife to the husband, her brain trying to catch up with what she'd just heard. "And Navy SEAL?" she stammered, the arrogance draining from her voice. The SEAL finally spoke, his tone calm but commanding. "Yes." One word, but it carried the weight of a lifetime. He stepped forward, closing the space between them until Karen had no choice but to step back. His eyes never left hers. "I've faced men with weapons. I've stood in places where every second meant life or death. I've seen things that would break most people, and through all of it, I survived. I came home, and now my mission is to protect my family. You think for 1 second I'll let you lay a hand on my wife or child. You're mistaken." Karen's bravado cracked completely. Her sunglasses, once a shield of superiority, now looked more like a mask she was hiding behind. Her lips parted, but no insults came. Instead, a nervous laugh slipped out, high-pitched and unconvincing. I was only trying to look out for the neighborhood," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "That's all. I didn't mean—" But it was too late. Across the street, neighbors had gathered. Curtains were pulled back, doors were open, and phones were raised. People were recording. Some whispered to each other, shaking their heads, their eyes fixed on Karen. For years, she had bullied them, fining them for grass that grew half an inch too tall, lecturing them for leaving trash bins out too long, scolding children for laughing too loudly while playing. Many had suffered in silence, too afraid of her retaliation to push back. But now, they were watching the bully exposed. Karen's power was crumbling, and she knew it. The mother, her baby cradled safely in her arms, spoke again, her voice calm but sharp. "You thought we were weak. You thought you could intimidate us because we're new here. But you had no idea who you were dealing with. You tried to take my baby. You insulted my husband. And now the whole neighborhood sees the truth." Karen's face turned pale. She glanced around, realizing every pair of eyes was on her, every phone capturing her downfall. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with her phone, tucking it awkwardly back into her pocket. The Navy SEAL took one more step closer, his voice dropping so low only she and the watching neighbors could hear clearly. "Listen carefully," he said. "This ends now. You will not threaten my wife. You will not touch my child. You will not step onto this property again. Do I make myself clear?" Karen swallowed hard. Her throat bobbed as she forced out a whisper. "Why, yes." Her voice cracked. The once dominant HOA queen was now standing small, cornered not by violence, but by truth, authority, and her own arrogance. Behind her, a neighbor muttered just loud enough for others to hear. About time someone stood up to her. Another chuckled quietly, while a woman down the street recorded every second with a satisfied grin. Karen felt the judgmental stares burning into her. For the first time in years, she wasn't the one holding the power. The mother kissed her baby's forehead, her heart pounding but her body finally relaxing. The baby, sensing the calm in his mother's embrace, let out a soft sigh and nestled deeper into her arms. The SEAL stood tall beside them, his arm gently wrapping around his wife's shoulders. His eyes never left Karen until she finally turned, her steps quick and uneven as she tried to retreat down the driveway without drawing more humiliation. But every movement screamed defeat. Every neighbor watching knew what had just happened. The HOA queen had finally been dethroned by the very family she had tried to destroy. And deep down, Karen knew she would never live this down. Karen stood frozen on the sidewalk, her face burning as whispers rippled across the street. Her perfect image, the one she had worked so hard to maintain with her press suits, her endless complaints, and her fake smiles, was crumbling in real time. For years, she had controlled this neighborhood through fear, intimidation, and her self-declared authority as head of the HOA. But in one afternoon, in front of dozens of witnesses, that power had been ripped away. She tried to salvage it. I was only trying to help," she muttered weakly, her voice cracking. "I care about this community. That's all. You're twisting my words. I never meant to." But no one was listening. The neighbors who had once ducked their heads to avoid her gaze now looked at her openly, their expressions ranging from disgust to relief. For the first time, they saw her exposed, not as a leader, but as a bully who had finally been challenged. The Navy SEAL's arm tightened protectively around his wife. He didn't raise his voice, but when he spoke, the authority in his tone silenced the entire street. "Enough," he said. The single word hit like a command. Karen froze, her excuses dying on her tongue. "We're not here to play your games," he continued, his voice steady. "We moved here because we wanted peace, a safe place to raise our son. But peace doesn't mean weakness. If you or anyone else thinks they can threaten my wife or child, they're wrong." He took a slow step forward, his eyes locked on Karen's. She instinctively stepped back. "This is my family," he said firmly, "and protecting them isn't just my choice, it's my mission. I don't care about your title, your rules, or your ego. If you ever try something like this again, you'll regret it. Do we understand each other?" The street was so quiet you could hear the leaves rustling in the breeze. Karen swallowed hard, her throat tight, and nodded. "Why, yes," she stammered. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, was now thin and fragile. The Navy SEAL didn't move for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then, slowly, he turned back to his wife, his expression softening as he glanced at the baby nestled against her chest. The little one's tiny breaths came steady now, soothed by the calm strength of his father's presence. "Come on," the SEAL said gently, guiding his wife back toward the house. They stepped inside together, the door closing behind them with a quiet finality that echoed louder than any slam. Karen remained standing in the street, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. She could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. The neighbors weren't rushing to comfort her or defend her. No one was applauding her authority. Instead, they were shaking their heads, whispering to one another, and recording her humiliation for the world to see. One man leaned against his porch railing, muttering, "Looks like the Queen just lost her crown." A woman across the street smirked, her phone still raised. "About time someone put her in her place," she said under her breath. Karen's chest tightened. She turned on her heel and hurried away. Her once proud stride reduced to an uneven shuffle. For the first time in years, she wasn't feared. She was pitted. Inside the house, the young mother sank onto the couch, still clutching her baby tightly. Her arms ached from holding him so firmly, but she couldn't let go. Not yet. She kissed the top of his tiny head, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "I was so scared," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her husband knelt in front of her, resting a hand gently on her knee. His eyes, usually so steady and unreadable, softened with emotion. "You don't ever have to be scared," he said quietly. "Not while I'm here." She looked at him, her lips trembling into a small, grateful smile. But what if she comes back? What if she tries something else? He shook his head, his jaw set with quiet determination. She won't. She's been exposed. She's not as powerful as she thinks. And even if she tries, she'll have to go through me first. And that will never happen. The baby stirred, letting out a soft coo. The mother laughed through her tears, pressing another kiss to his forehead. "He doesn't even know what just happened," she said softly. "He's so innocent. And people like her." Her voice trailed off, heavy with the thought of what could have been. The seal reached out, brushing his hand against the baby's tiny fingers. "That's why I do this," he said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "That's why I've done everything I've done. So he never has to know what it feels like to be afraid. So you never have to doubt that you're safe. That's my mission now." The mother leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. For the first time since stepping outside that afternoon, she felt truly safe. Meanwhile, the neighborhood buzzed with quiet conversation. Word of the confrontation spread quickly, carried by text messages, whispered phone calls, and inevitable videos that were already making their way online. By evening, everyone would know what had happened. How Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, had tried to snatch a baby and been put in her place by a Navy SEAL. Some neighbors felt vindicated, relieved that someone had finally stood up to her. Others felt ashamed that they hadn't been the ones to do it themselves. But all agreed on one thing. Things in the neighborhood would never be the same again. As for Karen, she kept her head down for days. Her once daily patrols around the block stopped. Her endless complaints quieted. And when she did show her face, she avoided eye contact, muttering excuses about being misunderstood. But no one bought it. Her reign was over. Back inside the home, the SEAL stood by the window, watching the street quietly. His wife rocked the baby gently in her arms, humming softly. "You think she'll really leave us alone now?" she asked. He didn't take his eyes off the street. "She will," he said with certainty, "because she knows what I'm capable of. And because she knows this," he turned, his gaze softening as it fell on his wife and child. "It's the one battle I'll never lose." The baby let out a tiny sigh, drifting into sleep. The mother smiled, her heart finally at ease. Because while the battlefield had changed, from war zones overseas to quiet suburbs, the mission had not. Protecting his family was, and always would be, his greatest fight. And in that fight, he would never surrender.